Welcome to Civil War Digital Digest. I'm Will. Well, we're back at the Waterloo Farm Historic Museum today, where we're going to bring you an episode about the two most advanced small arm weapons of the Civil War. That is the Henry and the Spencer. These are weapons that I've actually been blessed this year. I've been able to see originals of both of them, handle them, and we'll talk about that as well. We're going to talk about their practical applications if you want to use them in living history, and what to avoid and some not to do. So let's get started. So first, we're going to take a look at the Spencer rifle. Here I have a reproduction of the 1865 Spencer. The Spencer rifle came in two versions, the 1860 and the 1865. There are changes internally, but the main workings are pretty much the same. The weapon loads through the butt with a tube magazine. On the reproduction, you'll find that there is a red plastic end to the tube. You can replace this with an original brass end to upgrade it. 7 rounds slide in the back. The weapon then closes, and it can be loaded and fired from there. There were slight caliber differences between the 60 and the 65. The 1860 is 56-56 with a 52 caliber round. The 1865 is 56-50 with a 50 caliber round. The notable difference between today's reproductions and the originals back then is the originals were set up to fire rim fire. Our modern reproductions are set up for center fire. It facilitates reloading. To fire this weapon, you half-cock the weapon, work the action to bring a round into the chamber, full-cock the weapon, and then fire it. It's a little bit cumbersome to load, but can be loaded single shot through if need to be. This is a durable, reliable firearm. When issued to the infantry, it can come with a bayonet. The reproductions don't have them, but I was blessed this spring to be in a private collection where I got to observe a Spencer rifle with fitting bayonet, which you see here. This weapon was used by infantry and cavalry alike. The 1st Regiment in the Army of the Potomac to be totally armed with the Spencer rifle was the 5th Michigan Cavalry. They used them at the East Cavalry Field fight at the Battle of Gettysburg. It's fantastic to have 7 rounds in your chamber. There's only one problem. A spring 1863 newspaper from Ann Arbor had a letter from one of the members of the 5th Michigan Cavalry, and he described what they were carrying. He mentioned they were only carrying 42 rounds each for their rifles. Well, why 42? Here's an easy way to know. My friend Jordan has built me a reproduction of one of the Spencer ammunition boxes. This is the way the ammunition could come issued to the men. There was an outer box. When you pulled it off inside, you find 6 little boxes. Each of them holds 7 rounds of the Spencer ammunition. Another great use of the Spencer rifle at a regimental level, of course, goes brigade level, and that is Wilder's Mounted Infantry, a brigade of Federal infantry out west that find themselves mounted, and their commander, Colonel Wilder, secures Spencer's. The brigade was famously engaged with Confederates at Hoover's Gap during the Tullahoma campaign. Colonel Connolly of the 123rd Illinois of the brigade tells the story. 2 things to note here. 1, Connolly mentions that it was raining heavily all day, and those brass cartridges compared to the paper cartridges of the Confederates surely helped. Throughout the pouring rain the Confederates attacked. Colonel Connolly mentioned they didn't know we had Spencers, and their charging yell was answered by another terrible volley, and another without cessation. You can see where 7 rounds in the magazine help these men repel Confederate charges, and you can see the officers shepherding the amount of ammunition by firing volleys and not letting the men just go to independent fire. At the end of the fight, Wilder's brigade was reinforced by both infantry and artillery, and at that point, General Thomas, the corps commander, came up, and he said to the men, "You have saved the lives of 1,000 men by your gallant conduct today. I didn't expect to get this gap for 3 days." So if you have a Spencer and you want to use it in living history, I'm going to recommend a couple of things. Blanks, you can either get brass blanks or find the extruded plastic blanks that you fill and then put a shotgun shell in the back. Make sure you have boxes in your camp to show how the ammunition gets to you, and don't just dump stuff in your cartridge boxes. That's probably a good use in the field. However, when you're setting up ammunition box and then the separate individual wrapping boxes are a great thing. Be sure to work on cleaning and make sure the story is right. There's no reason to go to the Battle of Bull Run with a Spencer rifle. Make sure your story is good. It's going to give you a better experience. It's going to help people who watch you have a better experience. Well, how do you deal with these weapons in the field? As far as the manual goes, it's something that we searched for, and it's something the fellows back then tried to figure out. We don't have anything to give you on the Henry, but on the Spencer we do. In 1864, there was a drill manual written by an officer from Ohio. A copy of that still exists, and our friends at the 11th OVC Cavalry have put a copy of it as a PDF on the manual section of their website. We'll put a link below and say thanks to Steve and the gang for making this available to all of us. This is the Henry rifle, originally chambered in 4440. It came in a couple of different variants, smaller numbers in steel frames, larger numbers in the brass frame like this reproduction here. Now, the government only purchased about 1,700 of these. There were definitely some drawbacks. This weapon is not quite as sturdy. It's a little bit more finicky. And the Henry Company, when it switched over to Winchester, learned something in the next weapon, and that was put a forestock here, put something wood. This has been sitting in the sun and the metal's already hot. We haven't even fired a round out of it. How do you load this weapon? It's real straightforward. We turn it, we run the spring all the way up, it slides over, and your ammunition drops in. Again, this weapon was made to be rim fire, so during the war you don't have a problem just dropping one round on another. Today, if you're shooting live, you're shooting center fire, be careful. Load them at a little bit of an angle so there's not so jarring. Another thing we know about the reproductions, they don't hold quite as many rounds. This reproduction only holds 13 rounds in the magazine. The original could hold 15 rounds in the magazine, plus you could also preload one in the chamber for a total of 16. Definitely a gunfire advantage. Well, looking at the Henry practically for living history, it's a lot more limited than the Spencer is. Make sure you find the right time and right place. A great example is if you're going to play the 66th Illinois Burgess Western Sharpshooters. They're a fantastic story. A couple of years ago, we talked about sharpshooting with Dan Wambaugh, and he described the role of the sharpshooter like this.
Basically, it runs the gamut from what we know of as light infantry from, say, the Napoleonic time to a modern sniper using a weapon that can kill someone at a mile. And all of these guys are called sharpshooters.
As you can see during the Civil War, the term sharpshooter really took on two roles. It was the role of the sniper, which Burgess Western Sharpshooters started as with the big heavy target rifles, and then it's the role of the light infantry, which is skirmishers and close quarters fighting, which probably is more what they found themselves doing when they switched to buying the Henry rifles. These rifles don't have a great range compared to the target rifles, but you can shoot them a lot faster. You see the two different roles, the two different needs, and you can see what the regiment found itself doing. If you're going to use it, also be sure to find a way to make your ammunition look good. You see a couple of boxes from two different manufacturers as far as reproduction boxes, 50 rounds of metallic each. Our blanks are 45 long Colt because that's what the weapon's chambered for. Let's take these two weapons out. Let's take them for a spin. Chad and Huck are going to uniform up and we'll see what they can do. We're going to fire each weapon a full magazine from empty. Next to them, the other fellow is going to be loading a musket starting from empty. We'll see how long it takes to start with an empty weapon, load the weapon, and exhaust it. The musket will continue to load and fire until we're done. Let's have a look. Commence. Firing. and commence firing. Well, there's the Henry and the Spencer. A look at them, a look at how they fire in comparison to the musket. I did this intentionally. On another video you can find online, the late Arlie Army went ahead and compared the Henry to the Spencer to see which was better. He found the Henry because it fired faster and held more. Honestly, the Spencer has the forearm, the Spencer has a bigger round, and comparing these two to each other, I find fairly irrelevant. The test we just did, that's what's relevant. Most Confederates had muskets only. How do either of these weapons stack up against muskets? You have a lot more ability to fire before empty, as long as you don't run out of ammunition. Keep that in mind. For the Civil War Digital Digest, hope you enjoyed this look at the two high technology weapons of the Civil War. These two weapons arguably really helped the Union forces prevail over the Confederates, along with many other factors. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon.